Jason Miller had always been drawn to the allure of old houses. When he inherited the sprawling Victorian mansion from a distant relative he scarcely knew, he saw it as the perfect chance to start anew. Moving to the secluded town of Willow Creek was exactly what he needed after several challenging years. The house stood at the end of a long, tree-lined street, its grandeur partially obscured by overgrown ivy and the towering shadows of ancient pine trees. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Jason drove up to the property, excitement bubbling within him. The mansion loomed large against the dusky sky, its windows reflecting the fading light. As he approached, the wrought iron gate creaked open as if welcoming him, allowing him to step onto the gravel path that led to the entrance. He parked his car, the gravel crunching under his boots, and took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of aged wood and damp earth. Inside, the house was a blend of elegance and neglect. High ceilings adorned with intricate moldings, grand staircases winding up to unseen floors, and rooms filled with antique furniture that seemed to whisper stories of the past. Jason felt a mix of awe and apprehension as he explored each space, imagining the lives that had unfolded within these walls. The air was thick with the weight of history, every corner holding secrets waiting to be uncovered. It was in the back of the house, near the expansive library, that he first encountered the corridor. At first glance, it appeared like any other hallway, long, narrow, with doors lining both sides. But something about it felt different, unsettling. The air grew colder as he stepped inside, and the ambient sounds of the house seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against his ears. Jason walked down the corridor, his footsteps echoing softly against the old wooden floor. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, depicting elaborate patterns that had lost their vibrancy over time. As he moved further, the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, defying the house's layout he had meticulously mapped out earlier. The light from the tall windows barely penetrated the gloom, casting long, distorted shadows that danced along the walls in the dim light. A chill ran down his spine as he tried to rationalize what he was experiencing. Perhaps it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, heightened by the isolation and the house's mysterious aura. He reached for his phone to check the time, only to find that it had no signal. A sense of unease settled over him, but curiosity pushed him to continue exploring. As he walked, faint whispers began to emerge from the darkness, barely audible but undeniably present. Jason stopped, straining to listen, but the whispers faded as quickly as they had appeared. He shook his head, dismissing it as the wind or the house settling. Yet, the corridor seemed to respond to his presence, the air growing thicker, the shadows more pronounced with each step he took. Determined to keep his bearings, Jason decided to mark his path, placing small notes on the walls to keep track of where he had been. Despite his efforts, every time he turned around, the corridor had shifted slightly, making his markers seem out of place. Panic started to creep in as he realized he might be lost within this seemingly endless hallway. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding in his chest, trying to find a way back to the main part of the house. The corridor twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the heart of the mansion. The temperature continued to drop, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on him. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, he saw a faint light ahead, a glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness. As he approached, the light revealed a doorway at the end of the corridor, slightly ajar. Jason felt a surge of relief and anticipation. Could this be the way out? He reached for the door handle, his hand trembling, and pushed the door open. Instead of finding an exit, he was met with another identical corridor, stretching out in the opposite direction. Jason stepped back, bewildered. How could this be? He was certain he had come from the other side. The realization hit him hard. He was trapped in a loop, a never-ending maze that defied logic and reason. The whispers returned, louder this time, surrounding him from all sides. Fear took hold as he understood that leaving the corridor might not be as simple as he had hoped. With no other option, Jason took a deep breath and continued forward, determined to uncover the secrets of the endless corridor. Little did he know, his journey was just beginning, and the true horrors of the mansion were yet to be revealed. The days following Jason Miller's unsettling encounter in the endless corridor were filled with a restless determination to understand the mansion's mysteries. Each morning, he awoke to the same creaks and groans of the old house, sounds he had initially dismissed as part of its aged structure. However, the corridor remained a persistent enigma, its presence lingering in his thoughts and dreams. Jason decided that to make sense of what he had experienced, he needed to delve into the history of the mansion. Armed with a notebook and a sense of purpose, he began his research in the town's small library. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, a kind elderly woman with a wealth of local knowledge, greeted him warmly. "I've heard some stories about the old Whitaker place," Jason mentioned casually, referring to the mansion's name. "I was hoping to learn more about its past." Mrs. Thompson's eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The Whitaker mansion has quite a history. Built in the late 1800s by Henry Whitaker, it was one of the grandest homes in Willow Creek. But after his mysterious disappearance, the house changed hands several times, each owner leaving under strange circumstances. Jason listened intently as Mrs. Thompson recounted tales of previous residents who reported unexplained noises, fleeting shadows, and a general sense of unease. One story in particular caught his attention: the account of Margaret Whitaker, Henry's wife, who was said to wander the halls late at night, searching for her lost husband. Determined to uncover more, Jason visited the local historical society the next day. He pored over old newspaper clippings, property records, and personal letters donated by previous owners. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, revealing a pattern of inexplicable events that plagued the mansion for decades. As he delved deeper, Jason began to notice subtle changes around the house. Doors that were once firmly shut now seemed slightly ajar, and items he had placed meticulously would be found out of place. At first, he attributed these to his own forgetfulness or the natural settling of the house. But the occurrences became more frequent and harder to dismiss. One evening, while reviewing his notes in the library, Jason heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down the endless corridor. His heart raced as he glanced up, but the corridor appeared as it always did: long, narrow, and unending. He waited, holding his breath, but the footsteps faded into silence. Shaken, he decided to confront the corridor once more. Armed with a flashlight and his notebook, Jason approached the mysterious hallway. The air was thick and cold, much like his first encounter. He called out softly, "Hello? Is someone there?" His voice echoed back to him, swallowed by the vastness of the corridor. As he walked, the whispers he had heard before seemed to grow louder, forming indistinct words that teased the edges of his understanding. Jason pressed on, determined to find answers. He reached the spot where he had first entered the corridor and noticed something he hadn't before: a faint outline on the floor, as if someone had stepped there recently. Kneeling down, he realized it was a series of small, almost invisible footprints leading deeper into the hallway. Following the trail, Jason felt a mix of fear and excitement. The footprints led him to a door he had not noticed before, nestled at the far end of the corridor. It was an old, wooden door with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Taking a deep breath, he reached out and slowly turned the handle. The door creaked open to reveal a small study, untouched by time. Dust-covered bookshelves lined the walls, and a large oak desk stood in the center of the room, papers scattered across its surface. Jason approached the desk and found a bundle of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Carefully, he untied them and began to read. The letters were written by Henry Whitaker, detailing his growing paranoia and fear that something within the house was watching him. His words became increasingly frantic, describing nightly disturbances and a presence that seemed to manipulate the very structure of the mansion. The final letter was a desperate plea for help, hinting at a hidden truth behind the endless corridor. As Jason absorbed the contents, a sudden chill filled the room. The temperature dropped further, and the shadows seemed to lengthen, creeping along the walls like dark tendrils. He glanced up, half expecting to see Margaret Whitaker searching for her husband, but the room remained empty. Closing the letters, Jason felt a renewed sense of urgency. The mansion's secrets were intertwined with his own fate, and the endless corridor was the key to unraveling them. Determined to push forward, he knew that understanding the past was essential to escaping the present. That night, as Jason lay in bed, the whispers returned, more distinct and insistent than before. They seemed to beckon him, urging him to return to the corridor and uncover the truth. With a mixture of dread and resolve, he realized that his journey was far from over. The mansion held more secrets, and he was now deeply entwined in its haunting legacy. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Jason Miller's bedroom, casting long shadows across the room. Despite the peaceful appearance, Jason felt anything but calm. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on his mind, leaving him restless and uneasy. Determined to make progress, he decided to spend the day exploring more of the mansion, hoping to uncover additional clues that might help him understand the endless corridor. After a quick breakfast, Jason gathered his notebook, flashlight, and a few basic tools, preparing for a day of investigation. He had mapped out the main areas of the house, but knew there were still many rooms left to explore. His thoughts kept drifting back to the corridor and the mysterious study he had discovered. The whispers that had beckoned him that night continued to linger in his mind, urging him to return. Jason began his exploration in the west wing of the mansion, a section he had yet to fully investigate. The rooms here were less ornate, with simpler furnishings and fewer personal touches. As he moved from room to room, he noted signs of previous inhabitants, old photographs, broken furniture, and remnants of lives long past. Each discovery added a layer to the mansion's history, painting a picture of a once thriving household now abandoned to time and decay. As the day progressed, Jason became increasingly aware of subtle changes within the house. Doors that had been firmly closed when he first arrived now hung slightly ajar, and objects he had placed in specific locations were found moved or misplaced. At first, he dismissed these occurrences as the result of the house settling or his own forgetfulness. However, the frequency and nature of these changes made it difficult to ignore any longer. Determined to get to the bottom of these disturbances, Jason returned to the corridor. Armed with his flashlight and a renewed sense of purpose, he approached the mysterious hallway with caution. The air grew colder as he stepped inside, and the oppressive silence seemed to press in around him. He began to walk, his footsteps echoing softly against the old wooden floor. As he progressed, the corridor appeared unchanged, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The walls seemed to close in slightly, and the shadows danced more menacingly in the dim light. He tried to stay focused, reminding himself that fear was only a product of his imagination. Yet the sensation of being watched lingered, making every step feel heavier than the last. Jason decided to mark his path again, this time with small pieces of tape he had brought along. He placed them at regular intervals, hoping to create a reliable trail back to the entrance. Despite his efforts, the corridor continued to defy his expectations. Each time he looked back, the tape markers were slightly askew, as if the hallway itself was shifting to confuse him. Frustration began to mount as Jason realized that the corridor might be altering itself purposefully. He quickened his pace, eager to find a way back to the main part of the house. However, the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, with no sign of an exit in sight. The temperature continued to drop, and the once faint whispers grew louder, swirling around him in an unsettling chorus. As evening approached, Jason's sense of isolation deepened. The mansion's vastness seemed to amplify his loneliness, each empty room and shadowed hallway reinforcing the feeling that he was completely alone. The corridor, however, felt different, like a living entity that thrived on his fear and confusion. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched his quickening heartbeat. Exhausted and on the verge of panic, Jason paused to catch his breath. He leaned against the cool wall, trying to steady his nerves. The whispers were now a constant presence, their words unintelligible but filled with an unmistakable urgency. He closed his eyes, taking deep breaths in an attempt to calm himself. Memories of his life outside the mansion flickered through his mind. Friends, family, and the world he had left behind, all seeming distant and unreachable. In that moment of vulnerability, Jason realized the true extent of his isolation. The mansion wasn't just a physical trap. It was isolating him mentally and emotionally, feeding off his fears and insecurities. The endless corridor symbolized his entrapment, a never-ending loop that reflected his internal struggle. He understood that to escape, he would need to confront not only the mysteries of the house, but also his own inner demons. Determined to break free from the corridor's grasp, Jason resolved to push forward despite his mounting fear. He knew that finding answers was the key to his survival, and he couldn't afford to let the mansion's dark influence consume him. With a final surge of determination, he continued down the seemingly infinite hallway, each step bringing him closer to uncovering the truth behind the endless corridor and the secrets it held. As night fully settled over Willow Creek, the mansion stood silent and foreboding, its windows reflecting the inky darkness outside. Inside, Jason pressed on, unaware of the challenges and horrors that awaited him in the depths of the endless corridor. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he knew that turning back was no longer an option. The true battle for his sanity and freedom had only just begun. As the days turned into nights, Jason Miller's exploration of the mansion deepened his understanding of its haunted legacy. Each room he uncovered seemed to reveal another layer of the house's dark history. But it was the corridor that remained the most perplexing and unnerving. Determined to make sense of the endless hallway, Jason began to document every anomaly, hoping to piece together the puzzle that bound him to the mansion. One late afternoon, as the golden light of dusk streamed through the tall windows, Jason returned to the corridor with renewed determination. He carried his notebook, flashlight, and a small camera, intent on capturing any evidence of the supernatural occurrences he had been experiencing. The air inside the corridor was thick and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth outside. Shadows danced along the walls, seemingly moving with a life of their own. As Jason walked, he noticed subtle changes in the environment. The wallpaper patterns appeared more intricate, and the wooden floorboards creaked under his weight in an oddly rhythmic manner. He paused to take a photograph of the fading patterns, hoping to analyze them later for any hidden meanings or clues. Suddenly, the temperature dropped noticeably, causing Jason to shiver. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the encroaching darkness. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the corridor. Heart pounding, he turned quickly, but the figure had vanished. Jason rubbed his eyes, convincing himself it was a trick of the light or his imagination playing up his fears. Continuing down the corridor, Jason began to hear faint whispers echoing around him. The voices were indistinct, barely audible, but their presence was undeniable. He slowed his pace, straining to make out any words or phrases. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, surrounding him in a ghostly chorus. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone to record the sounds, but it flickered and died, leaving him in unnerving silence once more. Undeterred, Jason pressed on, his curiosity overcoming his fear. As he walked, he noticed old photographs lining the walls, their images faded but still recognizable. The pictures depicted families and gatherings from decades past, their smiles frozen in time. One photograph in particular caught his attention. It showed a man and a woman standing at the very end of the corridor, eerily similar to the shadowy figure he had seen earlier. The realization sent a chill down his spine. Was this a hint of the mansion's past residents still lingering within its walls? Jason decided to investigate further, approaching the spot where the shadow had appeared. As he reached out to touch the wall, a sudden gust of cold air swept through the corridor, extinguishing his flashlight. Plunged into darkness, Jason's breath quickened and his heart raced. He fumbled for his phone, hoping to use its faint light to navigate, but the device remained unresponsive. Panic began to set in as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the space around him. In the darkness, Jason felt a presence behind him. He spun around, flashlight momentarily flickering back to life, only to reveal an empty corridor. The tension was palpable, and he struggled to maintain his composure. Taking deep breaths, he reminded himself that fear was a natural response, but he refused to let it paralyze him. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, uncovering the truth behind the endless corridor. Determined to find answers, Jason returned to the study where he had found Henry Whitaker's letters. He hoped there might be more clues hidden within those documents. The study was now bathed in the soft glow of twilight, the dust particles dancing in the air like tiny specters. He carefully examined the letters again, searching for any details he might have missed previously. One letter stood out, a fragmented entry that mentioned a hidden room and a ritual performed to contain an evil presence within the mansion. The handwriting was shaky, the words barely legible, but the implication was clear. Jason's mind raced with possibilities. Could the endless corridor be connected to this ritual? Was there a way to reverse its effects? As he pondered the implications, a loud crash echoed through the house, startling him. He jumped to his feet, the sound reverberating through the mansion's empty halls. The whispers returned, more coherent this time, forming words that sent chills down his spine. Leave. Now. Jason's resolve wavered for a moment, but he pushed the fear aside. He knew that to escape the corridor, he needed to understand its origin and the forces at play. Gathering his notes and the letters, he made his way back to the corridor, the oppressive atmosphere pressing in around him. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe, as if reacting to his presence. As he walked, the corridor began to change once more. Doors that were previously ajar swung open and closed on their own, and the layout seemed to shift unpredictably. Jason struggled to keep his bearings, relying on the markings he had placed earlier to guide him. The whispers followed him, now a persistent reminder of the mansion's restless spirits. Reaching the spot where the shadow had appeared, Jason felt a surge of determination. He focused on the photograph he had seen, trying to connect it to the letters and the mansion's history. Suddenly, the corridor illuminated with a faint, otherworldly light, revealing hidden symbols etched into the walls. The symbols glowed softly, casting an eerie luminescence that highlighted the intricate patterns. Jason realized that these symbols were part of the ritual mentioned in the letters. They seemed to form a pathway, a guide to navigating the supernatural forces within the mansion. With cautious optimism, he followed the illuminated symbols, hoping they would lead him to the hidden room and the answers he desperately sought. As he walked, the whispers began to harmonize, their tones less threatening and more instructive. They seemed to guide him, encouraging him to continue despite the mounting fear. The corridor no longer felt like an endless trap, but rather a conduit leading him toward the truth. Jason's footsteps echoed with purpose, each step bringing him closer to uncovering the mansion's deepest secrets. The journey through the corridor was both harrowing and enlightening, testing Jason's courage and resilience. He encountered fleeting apparitions of past residents, their silent presence a testament to the lives once lived within the mansion's walls. These encounters, though brief, reinforced his determination to solve the mystery and free himself from the corridor's grip. Finally, the illuminated symbols led him to a concealed door hidden behind a tapestry. Taking a deep breath, Jason reached out and pushed the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber. The room was filled with old books, candles, and various ritualistic artifacts. In the center stood an altar, its surface covered in ancient symbols and remnants of past ceremonies. Jason approached the altar, his heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. He knew that this chamber held the key to understanding the endless corridor and the forces that controlled it. As he examined the artifacts, he felt a presence behind him, a cold, intangible force that seemed to watch his every move. Turning slowly, Jason faced the corridor once more, the whispers now a harmonious chant guiding him toward his next steps. He realized that his journey was far from over, and the true test of his resolve was just beginning. With the chamber as his new focal point, Jason prepared to delve deeper into the mansion's supernatural mysteries, determined to uncover the truth and find a way to escape the endless corridor. Jason Miller felt a growing sense of urgency as he delved deeper into the mysteries of the mansion. Each day brought new revelations, yet the endless corridor remained the most perplexing and unnerving aspect of the house. Determined to uncover its secrets, Jason pored over every piece of information he had gathered, hoping to find a connection that would explain the corridor's supernatural nature. One rainy afternoon, as storm clouds gathered outside, Jason returned to the study where he had previously found Henry Whitaker's letters. The room was now more inviting, the dust settling in delicate patterns that caught the light from the window. He carefully spread out the bundle of letters on the large oak desk, his fingers tracing the faded ink of Henry's desperate pleas for help. As he read through the letters again, a particular entry caught his eye. It was a fragmented diary entry, hastily written and nearly illegible. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smeared in places as if Henry had been writing in a hurry. The entry spoke of growing paranoia and fear, mentioning that the house seemed to watch him, its corridors shifting to trap him within its walls. Henry wrote about a ritual performed by previous owners to contain an evil presence, but the details were scarce and cryptic. Jason's mind raced as he pieced together the fragmented information. The endless corridor wasn't just a physical anomaly. It was a manifestation of something far darker. He wondered if the corridor was a limbo, a space created by the mansion to trap souls, or perhaps to isolate individuals who entered its depths. The diary hinted at a ritual, a means to control or contain the malevolent force that plagued the house. Determined to find more, Jason searched the study for any additional clues. Behind a large bookshelf, he discovered a hidden compartment. Inside was an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Carefully, he opened the journal, revealing meticulous entries detailing the daily lives of the Whitaker family. The entries were filled with descriptions of family gatherings, personal reflections, and gradual mentions of strange occurrences that became more frequent and intense over time. One entry stood out, dated just days before Henry's disappearance. It described a severe storm that had battered the mansion, causing power outages and forcing the family to huddle together in the main hall. During the storm, strange noises echoed through the house, whispers, footsteps, and the sound of something scraping against the walls. Henry wrote about feeling an oppressive presence, as if the house itself was alive and intent on keeping them trapped. Jason felt a chill run down his spine as he read the final, desperate entry. Henry had written about a failed attempt to perform the ritual mentioned earlier, hoping to banish the entity that haunted the mansion. The ritual had gone wrong, resulting in Henry's disappearance and leaving the mansion to suffer under the entity's control. The endless corridor, Jason realized, was a direct result of that failed ritual, a perpetual loop designed to trap anyone who dared to enter. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Jason knew he had to find a way to reverse the effects of the ritual. The journal contained vague instructions and references to specific symbols that were etched into the walls of the corridor. He recalled the illuminated symbols he had seen earlier and realized they were likely part of the ritual, channels through which the entity maintained its hold over the mansion. Determined to break the cycle, Jason decided to return to the concealed chamber he had discovered in the previous chapter. He believed that the artifacts and symbols within held the key to performing the counter-ritual. As he made his way through the endless corridor, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The whispers that once filled him with dread now seemed to guide him, urging him to continue his quest for freedom. Entering the concealed chamber, Jason was met with a scene frozen in time. The altar at the center was adorned with candles, old books, and various ritualistic artifacts. The symbols etched into the walls glowed faintly, their light pulsing rhythmically. Jason approached the altar, carefully examining each item. He identified components mentioned in the journal, candles of specific colors, symbols that matched those in the journal, and an ancient tome bound in cracked leather. Jason knew that performing the counter-ritual would require precision and courage. He began by lighting the candles in the order specified in the journal, their flames flickering to life despite the damp atmosphere. He placed the ancient tome on the altar, opening it to the page that detailed the counter-ritual. The instructions were clear, but required absolute focus and belief in their power. As he recited the incantation, the room seemed to respond. The symbols on the walls intensified in brightness, and a low hum filled the chamber. The air grew thick with energy, and the oppressive presence that had long haunted the mansion began to wane. Jason felt a surge of hope, believing that he was on the verge of breaking the endless corridor's hold. However, the entity was not willing to relinquish its control without a fight. Shadows coalesced into a dark figure, materializing before Jason. The apparition's eyes glowed with malevolence, and its form twisted unnaturally as it advanced toward him. Jason stood his ground, reciting the final lines of the incantation with unwavering determination. The room shook as the battle between light and darkness intensified, the outcome uncertain. With a final, desperate chant, Jason felt a wave of energy surge through him. The entity let out a deafening scream, its form dissipating into the shadows as the symbols on the walls blazed with pure light. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the endless corridor began to dissolve, the perpetual loop breaking apart. Breathing heavily, Jason collapsed to the floor, the chamber now calm and serene. He had succeeded in performing the counter-ritual, but the cost was evident. The mansion, once a place of fear and entrapment, now felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The endless corridor was no more, replaced by a series of regular hallways that led to various rooms filled with the remnants of the past. As Jason stood up, he felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with exhaustion. The mansion had revealed its darkest secrets, and he had played a pivotal role in freeing it from the entity's grasp. Yet, he knew that his journey was not yet complete. The mansion still held many unanswered questions, and the true extent of the supernatural forces that had once controlled it remained to be discovered. Leaving the concealed chamber, Jason felt a newfound confidence. He was no longer just a visitor in the mansion. He was its liberator. The whispers had transformed from haunting reminders of his entrapment to guiding voices that had led him to this pivotal moment. As he walked through the now normal hallways, he felt the weight of the mansion's history lift, replaced by a sense of peace and closure. However, deep within the mansion, hidden away from his sight, something stirred. The entity had been defeated, but remnants of its presence lingered, hinting at unfinished business. Jason had made significant progress, but the mansion's true nature was still shrouded in mystery. As he prepared to uncover the remaining secrets, he remained unaware of the subtle shifts and changes that hinted at the lingering influence of the supernatural forces he had barely begun to understand. Jason knew that his time in the mansion was far from over. The discovery of the counter-ritual had opened doors to deeper mysteries, and he was determined to explore every corner to ensure that the mansion would no longer be a place of fear and entrapment. With resolve strengthening his steps, he moved forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in his quest to fully liberate the mansion from its haunted legacy. The morning light streamed through the newly unobstructed windows of the mansion, casting warm rays across the once oppressive halls. Jason Miller felt a sense of triumph as he walked through the now normal corridors, the weight of the endless corridor lifted. However, beneath his relief lay an undercurrent of unease. The mansion, though seemingly freed from its most sinister grip, still held an air of mystery that refused to dissipate. After successfully performing the counter-ritual, Jason had hoped for a sense of closure, but instead, he found himself grappling with a deeper internal struggle. The experiences he had endured in the endless corridor left him mentally and emotionally drained. Sleep eluded him as vivid nightmares replayed the horrors he had faced, blurring the lines between reality and his subconscious fears. Determined to regain his sanity and fully understand the mansion's secrets, Jason decided to explore the remaining areas that had previously remained hidden or unexplored. His research had revealed that the mansion contained numerous hidden rooms and passages, each potentially holding keys to its dark past. Armed with his notebook, flashlight, and a newfound resolve, he began his search with a cautious optimism. One afternoon, While examining the library, Jason noticed a peculiar pattern in the arrangement of the bookshelves. They seemed to form an almost deliberate maze, their placement too intentional to be mere coincidence. As he traced his fingers along the spines of ancient tomes, he felt a subtle vibration beneath his touch. Pressing against a specific shelf, it slowly swung open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passageway beyond. Heart pounding with anticipation, Jason stepped into the hidden corridor, the air thick with dust and the scent of aged paper. The passage led him to a small, secluded study that appeared untouched by time. The room was filled with more books, but unlike the others, these were bound in dark leather and adorned with unfamiliar symbols. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished but still reflecting a clear image. Jason approached the mirror, feeling an inexplicable pull towards it. As he gazed into his reflection, the room around him seemed to warp and distort. The once familiar surroundings twisted into a nightmarish landscape, with shadows stretching unnaturally and the air growing colder. His reflection began to change, the face in the mirror morphing into that of a gaunt, sorrowful figure, the very image of Henry Whitaker from the old photographs. Startled, Jason recoiled, breaking the connection with the mirror. The room returned to normal, but the encounter left him shaken. He realized that the mansion's supernatural influence extended beyond physical manifestations. It was also probing his mind, dredging up his deepest fears and insecurities. The mansion was not just a haunted place, but a sentient entity that thrived on psychological torment. Determined to confront these internal demons, Jason took a moment to collect himself. He understood that to fully free himself and the mansion from its dark legacy, he needed to address both the external and internal forces at play. The endless corridor had been a test of his resilience, and now he faced a more personal battle, one that required him to delve into his own psyche. As he continued his exploration, Jason discovered a series of journals hidden within the secret study. These journals belonged to previous residents who had also attempted to unravel the mansion's mysteries. Their entries detailed similar experiences of psychological distress, hallucinations, and a pervasive sense of being watched. It became clear that the mansion had a long history of preying on the minds of those who dared to uncover its secrets. One particular journal entry stood out, written by a woman named Eleanor Whitaker, Henry's sister. She described her own struggles with the mansion's influence, detailing how it had exacerbated her fears and led her to the brink of madness. Eleanor had attempted to perform the counter-ritual as well, but her efforts were incomplete, leaving her trapped in a perpetual state of anguish. Her final entry was a desperate plea for someone to finish what she had started, hoping that her sacrifices would finally free the mansion from its torment. Jason realized that Eleanor's fate mirrored his own, and her unfinished work was the key to fully dispelling the mansion's dark presence. The journals provided valuable insights into the rituals and the psychological tactics the mansion employed to maintain control over its inhabitants. Armed with this knowledge, Jason felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that to succeed, he had to confront not only the external threats, but also the internal fears that the mansion had awakened within him. That evening, as twilight descended over Willow Creek, Jason returned to the concealed chamber where he had performed the counter-ritual. The room was now calm, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, but the presence of the mansion's dark forces was still palpable. He carefully reviewed Eleanor's journal, noting the additional steps she had outlined to complete the ritual and fully banish the entity. As Jason prepared to undertake the final steps, he felt a surge of determination. He set up the altar once more, arranging the candles, books, and ritualistic artifacts according to Eleanor's instructions. The symbols on the walls seemed to respond to his actions, glowing faintly in acknowledgement of his efforts. He began the incantation, his voice steady despite the lingering fear that gnawed at his resolve. As he chanted, the room seemed to come alive with energy. The air grew thick with tension, and shadows danced menacingly along the walls. Jason felt the presence of the entity intensify, as if it were resisting his attempts to free the mansion. The struggle between light and darkness reached a fever pitch, the room vibrating with supernatural force. In the midst of the chaos, Jason's mind was assaulted by vivid memories and hallucinations. He saw flashes of his past, moments of joy and sorrow intertwined with the horrors he had faced in the mansion. The endless corridor reappeared in his mind's eye, a symbol of his entrapment and the psychological barriers he had to overcome. He realized that the mansion's influence was not just a curse, but a reflection of his own inner turmoil. Drawing upon his inner strength, Jason focused on the purpose behind his actions. He envisioned freeing himself from the mansion's grip, reclaiming his sanity, and honoring the sacrifices of those who had come before him. His determination surged, pushing back against the entity's attempts to break his spirit. The symbols on the walls blazed with pure light, countering the darkness that sought to envelop him. With a final, resolute chant, Jason felt a wave of energy surge through him, amplifying his intent. The entity let out a piercing scream, its form dissolving into the shadows as the symbols on the walls ignited with radiant brilliance. The oppressive atmosphere lifted entirely, and the mansion seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The dark presence finally vanished. Exhausted but triumphant, Jason collapsed to the floor, the chamber now serene and bathed in a gentle glow. The endless corridor was no more, replaced by a harmonious blend of light and tranquility. The mansion, once a place of fear and entrapment, now exuded a sense of peace and closure. Jason had not only freed himself, but also honored the legacy of those who had struggled before him. As he stood up, Jason felt a profound sense of accomplishment and liberation. The mansion's secrets had been unveiled, and the dark forces that had haunted it for generations were finally laid to rest. He knew that his journey had transformed him, strengthening his resolve and deepening his understanding of the intricate balance between light and darkness. With the mansion now free from its haunted legacy, Jason prepared to leave Willow Creek, knowing that he had played a pivotal role in unraveling its mysteries. As he walked through the once ominous halls, now bright and welcoming, he felt a sense of closure and peace. The mansion, its history fully revealed and its dark presence extinguished, stood as a testament to his courage and determination. However, as he reached the front entrance, a final whisper echoed through the air, a faint but clear reminder of the journey he had undertaken. "Thank you," it seemed to say, a lingering echo of gratitude from the restless spirits he had set free. With a deep breath, Jason stepped out into the sunlight, leaving behind the mansion that had tested his limits and ultimately led him to his own inner strength. The mansion stood silent behind him, its legacy transformed from a place of horror to one of redemption. Jason knew that the true horrors had been conquered, both external and internal, and that he was now free to move forward with his life, forever marked by the experiences that had shaped him. The morning after completing the counter ritual, Jason Miller felt a profound sense of relief wash over him. The mansion, once a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty, now exuded a calm and welcoming aura. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the halls that had once seemed so dark and oppressive. For the first time since his arrival, Jason allowed himself to breathe freely, believing that the worst was finally behind him. However, as the days passed, subtle signs began to indicate that not everything was as settled as it appeared. Objects occasionally moved without explanation, and faint whispers echoed through the halls at twilight. Jason dismissed these as residual energies or remnants of the mansion's long history, convincing himself that he had done all he could to cleanse the house of its dark presence. One evening, as dusk settled over Willow Creek, Jason decided to explore the upper floors of the mansion, areas he had previously avoided. The stairs creaked under his weight as he ascended, each step echoing softly in the now peaceful house. Reaching the top floor, he found a long hallway lined with doors that led to bedrooms, a nursery, and a forgotten attic. Despite the tranquility, a lingering unease gnawed at him, a whisper of doubt that perhaps the mansion was not entirely free. In the center of the hallway stood a large, ornate mirror, identical to the one he had encountered in the hidden study. Intrigued, Jason approached it, noting how the mirror seemed to reflect not just his image but also the room behind him with uncanny clarity. As he gazed into the glass, the reflection began to shimmer, and the room behind him distorted into a nightmarish version of itself. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the air grew cold, despite the warmth of the evening outside. Jason reached out to touch the mirror, his fingers meeting the cool, smooth surface. Suddenly, the reflection rippled like water, and an image of Henry Whitaker appeared, his eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. "You were so close," Henry whispered, his voice echoing through the room. "But there's still more to be done." Startled, Jason pulled his hand back, stepping away from the mirror. The reflection returned to normal, but the message lingered in his mind. He realized that the counter-ritual had not fully severed the mansion's connection to its dark past. There was still unfinished business, something that had been left unresolved. Determined to uncover the remaining secrets, Jason began to search the attic, believing that further clues awaited him there. The attic was cluttered with old trunks, forgotten toys, and remnants of past lives. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, filtering through the small windows, creating an ethereal atmosphere. As he sifted through the belongings, he discovered a series of old photographs and letters hidden beneath a pile of antique quilts. One photograph, in particular, caught his attention. It depicted the Whitaker family gathered around a grand dining table, their smiles masking an underlying tension. Standing beside them was a woman Jason did not recognize. Eleanor Whitaker, Henry's sister, whose journal had been instrumental in his quest to cleanse the mansion. Her presence in the photograph suggested a deeper connection between her and the mansion's dark forces. Jason carefully read through the letters, which revealed a hidden chapter of the Whitaker family history. Eleanor had been the true guardian of the mansion's secrets, responsible for maintaining the balance between the living and the supernatural. Her journal entries detailed her struggles to contain the malevolent entity, hinting at sacrifices made to keep it at bay. The final letter was a plea for someone to take up her mantle, to ensure that the mansion remained free from darkness. Realizing that Eleanor's legacy was incomplete, Jason understood that he needed to finish what she had started. The letters mentioned a hidden chamber beneath the mansion, accessible only through a specific sequence of actions involving the mirror and the endless corridor. Determined to honor Eleanor's sacrifice, Jason set out to locate this final piece of the puzzle. Returning to the concealed chamber, Jason found it unchanged since his last visit. The altar still stood at the center, surrounded by the same ritualistic artifacts. He placed the letters and the photograph of Eleanor on the altar, following the instructions detailed in the journals. As he began the incantation, the symbols on the walls glowed with a familiar light, responding to his presence. The mirror from the attic now appeared in the center of the chamber, its surface swirling with dark energy. Jason approached it cautiously, repeating the words of the ritual. The air thickened, and the temperature plummeted as the entity sensed his attempt to banish it once and for all. Shadows coalesced around him, taking on the form of the restless spirits he had encountered throughout his stay. With unwavering determination, Jason continued the chant, channeling all his fear and resolve into the ritual. The mirror began to crack, the reflections distorting further as the entity struggled to maintain its hold. The chamber trembled, books flying off shelves and candles extinguishing themselves as the battle between light and darkness intensified. In a final surge of energy, Jason completed the incantation, directing the combined power of the symbols and the mirror to seal the entity away. A blinding light enveloped the room, and the oppressive presence lifted, leaving behind a serene silence. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, each fragment dissolving into the air, signifying the end of the mansion's dark reign. Exhausted but victorious, Jason collapsed to the floor, the chamber now peaceful and bathed in a gentle glow. The endless corridor had been fully dismantled, replaced by a harmonious network of hallways that led to various rooms filled with light and warmth. The mansion, once a place of fear and entrapment, now stood as a beacon of redemption and closure. As Jason stood up, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and liberation. The mansion's secrets had been unveiled, and the dark forces that had haunted it for generations were finally laid to rest. He knew that his journey had transformed him, strengthening his resolve and deepening his understanding of the intricate balance between light and darkness. Leaving the concealed chamber, Jason took one last look around the now serene mansion. The whispers that had once tormented him were gone, replaced by the soothing sounds of nature outside. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had honored Eleanor's legacy and freed the mansion from its haunted past. As he descended the stairs, the mansion seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its walls no longer echoing with the remnants of fear and sorrow. Jason walked through the once ominous halls, now bright and welcoming, feeling the weight of the mansion's history lift with each step. The journey had been arduous, but the rewards of courage and perseverance were undeniable. However, as he reached the front entrance, a faint, lingering presence made itself known. A soft, ethereal glow emanated from the grounds, hinting at the subtle residual energies that still lingered. Jason paused, recognizing that while the mansion was free, the connections he had forged with its past would forever remain a part of him. With a deep breath, Jason stepped outside into the sunlight, leaving behind the mansion that had tested his limits and ultimately led him to his own inner strength. The house stood silent and transformed, a testament to his bravery and the enduring legacy of those who had come before him. As he drove away from Willow Creek, the mansion fading into the distance, Jason knew that the true horrors had been conquered, both external and internal. He was now free to move forward with his life, forever marked by the experiences that had shaped him. Yet, a small part of him remained connected to the mansion, a reminder of the thin veil between the ordinary and the supernatural, and the courage it takes to confront the darkness within. The first light of dawn broke through the curtains of Jason Miller's bedroom, casting a warm glow across the room that had once been filled with shadows and fear. Exhausted yet triumphant, Jason slowly opened his eyes, the events of the past weeks replaying in his mind like a haunting melody. The mansion stood silent and serene outside his window, its dark legacy finally laid to rest. Jason sat up, the weight of his experiences pressing down on him. The endless corridor, the supernatural encounters, the internal struggles, all of it had transformed him in ways he hadn't imagined. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure settle over him. The mansion, once a place of terror and entrapment, was now a symbol of his resilience and determination. He made his way downstairs, the morning sun illuminating the halls that had once seemed so menacing. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the very walls of the mansion were releasing him from their grip. The concealed chamber, now peaceful and devoid of dark energy, stood as a testament to his courage. Jason approached the altar one final time, placing his hand gently on its surface. He felt a surge of gratitude for the knowledge he had gained and the spirits he had helped to free. As he walked through the mansion, Jason took a moment to appreciate the beauty that had been overshadowed by darkness. The once oppressive atmosphere was replaced by a sense of tranquility and history. He wandered through the rooms, each one holding memories of his journey and the battles he had fought. The library, with its hidden passages and ancient texts, had been a cornerstone of his quest. The attic, once cluttered and forgotten, had revealed secrets that were crucial to his success. Jason reached the front entrance, pausing to look back at the mansion. He felt a deep connection to the house, a bond forged through adversity and triumph. The whispers that had once tormented him were now nothing more than distant echoes, replaced by the gentle sounds of nature outside. He knew that leaving the mansion would mark the end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of another. As he stepped out into the morning air, Jason felt a sense of liberation. The mansion behind him stood as a beacon of the past, its secrets now fully unveiled and its spirits at peace. He took one last look, the building bathed in sunlight, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey had been arduous, but he had emerged stronger and wiser, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Driving away from Willow Creek, Jason reflected on the lessons he had learned. The mansion had taught him about the strength of the human spirit, the power of determination, and the importance of facing one's fears. He realized that the true horror had not just been the supernatural forces he had battled, but the internal demons he had conquered along the way. The experience had left an indelible mark on him, shaping his outlook on life and his understanding of the world around him. As the mansion disappeared from view, Jason felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that the memories of his time there would stay with him, a reminder of the darkness he had overcome and the light he had found within himself. The journey through the endless corridor had not only freed the mansion, but had also liberated him from his own fears and insecurities. However, as he continued down the winding road, a subtle shift in the rearview mirror caught his eye. For a brief moment, he saw a flicker of movement near the mansion's entrance, a shadow slipping away into the morning mist. Jason's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light or his imagination. He had done what was necessary, and the mansion was at peace. With a final deep breath, Jason turned his attention back to the road ahead. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the path before him. He felt ready to move forward, carrying with him the strength and wisdom he had gained. The mansion of Willow Creek had been a chapter of his life filled with fear and darkness, but it had also been a journey of growth and self-discovery. As he drove into the horizon, Jason knew that he would never forget the lessons learned within those haunted walls. The mansion had changed him, and in turn, he had changed it. The balance between light and darkness, fear and courage, had been restored, leaving both Jason and the mansion free to exist in harmony. With a sense of fulfillment and a heart full of gratitude, Jason embraced the new beginning that awaited him, leaving behind the echoes of the past and stepping confidently into the future.